Welcome to Good Morning Hospitality, your one-stop shop for the latest news, noteworthy trends, and thought-provoking discussions across the industry. From hotels and short-term rentals to all things travel and hospitality, you'll find each episode equips you with the information you need to start your week. Join us on Good Morning Hospitality every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. Good morning, Sarah. How are you?
Good morning, Leo. And how's it going, buddy?
Very well, actually. Well, all the better for seeing you on this lovely morning. How was your weekend?
It was absolutely fabulous. We had a wedding, and it was one of those like 3-day wedding situations. We snaked out of the last day, but it was really, really, really good. It was like an event on Friday. It was one of my friends from work and her partner, who's also my property manager. And so it was nice because you like really know both of them fairly well. I don't know, it was beautiful. It was like a nice event, like a dinner on the Friday outside, and all the families coming together. He's from Lebanon and she is French. And then, of course, they've both been living here he's been living here for, almost 25 years. And she's been living here for 8 or 9. So then there was like a mix of Spanish people and international people that they've met in their travels and stuff. And it was such a good crew. And then, Saturday was awesome. They had a bus pick us up in Barcelona city center, take us outside to a beautiful vineyard. And then we were trapped, but in a good way there for like over 12 hours and just nothing but party and just endless food and drinks and music and dancing. And it was amazing.
Love that. Love that.
So
your property manager and your colleague, does that mean you introduced them? Are you matchmaking?
No, not at all. They were together long before. Actually, I was friends first with Cecile that I work with. And then she, at some point I was saying, hey, I want to look for, it was actually before I even bought the property. I said, I want to look for a property, but I'm not really sure about the market and I don't really know where to buy and I don't have time. I'd been on like 10 visits and they were all disgusting. And I just felt, ugh. And she's like, my partner, he's a PSI, which is like a personal shopper for real estate is what they call it in Spain. She's like, he's a PSI, he could help. So I connected with him and then he actually helped me find the property. He's the one that when I went to buy the property last year, and the people had not moved out yet, he and Mauro, because Mauro had to go to the airport because he was leaving that day, he stayed with me and like was really nice to these people. And obviously he's Lebanese and so he spoke Arabic with them and it was wonderful, and made me a lot less uncomfortable, I guess. So
Love it.
Yeah.
So a Lebanese and a French wedding. I imagine the food was pretty damn good, wasn't it?
The food was really good. The food was Spanish, to be fair. It's very Spanish. But it was absolutely delicious. The wine was even better. I remember commenting at one point, I was like, gosh, the wine is so good. And she goes, oh, you have no idea how long it took me to get the right wine, huh? It was terrible. She was like, she told me they must have tried at least 20 bottles. And she kept saying, no, take it away. No.
Very French. Very French. Take it away.
She's like, we did go with Catalan wine, at least because the people were like, oh, we don't really like to import wine. She's like, we'll go with the local wine, but you will find me a good one.
Love it. Well, that sounds great. Good for you. We were busy, lots of family stuff this weekend. We went to a mermaid parade down on the seafront in Brighton, which was obviously great. I've got a mermaid tattoo here.
Did you dress like a mermaid, Leo? Please tell me yes. And that there are pictures.
I didn't, but Sadie wore a brilliant mermaid skirt and her buddy wore a mermaid skirt. So I'll share a picture with you later, Sarah, of the mermaids. But yeah, it was good. It was a lovely day. And then we went for a couple of drinks in the lanes behind the seafront afterwards, which was nice. And then yesterday we were in London seeing some friends. So you got the train up to London on the weekend. For the first time, we've not done the weekend in London. We commute for work occasionally, but I've not done the weekend up there. So it was lovely. It was good. And also we haven't had the best weather here, but apparently it's getting nice. And we've got a Truvy team picnic tomorrow. So we're hoping for some sunshine. Yeah, we're up in London for a Truvy team picnic. So that's it.
That sounds awesome, buddy.
Mm.
Oh, I hope it doesn't rain on you.
Apparently it's okay. It looks good, actually. It looks good. So let's see. It probably will rain a little bit because it's UK, but a little bit of rain is okay. All right, let's get into it. What's caught your eye this week, my friend?
Let's see. Well, mine's actually a Spanish article in a news source called Preferente. And basically, it's sort of a classic, isn't it? In Spain, from the 1st of July, 2025, all properties that are rented, so that is short-term, mid-term, long-term, have to be listed and they have to have a registration number. And so now Spain's Federation for Consumers and Users, which sounds better in Spanish than it does in English translated for some reason, basically is going up against Airbnb and Booking, claiming that they're both violating this new national law, although in different degrees. So Airbnb basically has done absolutely nothing to stop properties from being created on their site without this registration number. So they basically just said, we don't care. Booking, although they have stopped new properties from being listed, they have not removed any of the properties that existed before that don't have the registration number. And then the basically the demanda is what it's called. So pretty much like when you take somebody to court, I don't even speak English right now. I don't know what that is. Like they're in the suing letter, like when they're suing them. I don't know. Basically what it says is that also on top of that, there's no sanctions. So they haven't put any sanctions for people who try and list properties without this registration number. And they're essentially putting, again, the burden on the OTAs to control this and to enforce it. So no real response from Airbnb or Booking so far that I could find. So it seems everybody is just ignoring them. But it's all over the Spanish press. And then the comments were especially fun. There was a couple of comments about like, oh yeah, great. You know, you keep raising the age of retirement. And then, you know, here I am and I have my second home that I bought with my good money when I was 30 years old and I can't even list it when I'm not there anymore. And anyway, good comments. Pretty good ones. Most of them about how, yeah, there's no choice and that the government's kind of taking over and that it's infringing on personal property rights and things like that. So, yeah, lots of interesting debate. But again, I don't know. Do you think the OTAs are the ones that should be held responsible for this, or should it be individuals? Which is another question.
Yeah, well, that's where my mind went with it. As I don't know really. It feels to me like it's more about personal responsibility. Let's have a light touch registration scheme, but let's not prevent people from utilizing their assets. And I don't think it's going to solve the problem. So, you know, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Is it overcrowding? Is it over tourism? We're going to come on to that later. If it is, stop allowing so many hotels to be built the whole time. But that clearly isn't the problem because you want the tourist revenue. Ergo, you know, where you're building a hotel, you could maybe build a multi-use block that also builds some houses for locals as well as some apartments for tourists or a small hotel within it. So let's have a real conversation about what's going on here. Let's ensure that the benefits of tourism are felt amongst locals so that they can feel like they're not excluded from it, but they're actually benefiting from it. Now, I'm not saying you need to put you know, a ticket machine on the Ramblas and only allow 50 people down it every hour, but you know, we're going to talk about this sort of thing later in the article. It pushes me there. It's like what type of city are you trying to build, and let's not kind of, you know, use the wrong methodology to demonize one part of the tourism mix. Or as you say quite rightly in the comments there, someone saying, well, yeah, this is kind of my asset. I've worked hard to save up and buy it. Why shouldn't I use it? So yeah, and in short, if it is the platform's responsibility, I'm tempted to say it's not really, in my opinion. I think. Yeah,
I would tend to agree with you.
So my eye has been caught by some interesting data from Eurostat. So there is data has been shared through the European Union, which is Eurostat is the European Union's data arm. That has been shared by the platforms, which shows that in the first quarter of this year, short-term rental growth was 4.8%, which is punchy, which is good. I mean, punchy is the wrong word. It's good. However, it's not broad-based in how it's been spread. So really, there's some fantastically well-performing regions in here. So we've got Malta, which is up 33%, Finland up 23%, and Bulgaria up 22%. Also notable, Poland is having a very, very good period. So it's 11.2% growth in that market, making it one of the top 7 markets in Europe. They feel like potentially it's driven by local travel as much as international travel, somewhere like Poland. So it's got a very big indigenous travel market, different resorts and cities that people want to go and see. So yeah, there's definitely some surprise winners there. I think Bulgaria and Poland make me think that people are sort of trying to find these out of the box destinations, maybe look for a better price in where they stay, and also potentially a reaction to regulation. because they're two markets that are not particularly regulated, or they have more positive regulatory landscape. I learned that when I went to Sofia for Scale Eastern Europe, versus somewhere like Holland, which has seen a decrease as a consequence of, again, I think both things. I think customers trying to look for better prices and customers slightly off by overzealous regulation. Why do I say that? Well, just because if it limits your choice and it causes the prices to get higher, generally speaking, younger people will vote with their feet because they just won't be, they'll just see themselves locked out of certain places. And then, Sarah, if you can think back to when we were both young people, we'd have been the same, right? You'd have been going to those new up and coming destinations because you worked out the price of a pint or a glass of wine plus the accommodation on the flight meant that it was a much more viable option for you and your friends. Again, I think that's where we've said in previous episodes of the pod, some of these destinations do need to have a bit of a think about whether they want to be pricing themselves out, or not or making themselves not as relevant to young people because they're the future of travel. And then the other one I think worth mentioning is this growth we talked about in Finland, 23% growth, which they think is driven by the growth in winter tourism. So people wanting to go to Lapland and all of those good things, which is nice. I definitely think many people are having a look at Northern Europe as well as the planet gets warmer, or people are trying to go away through more of the year. So I think that's very, very cool. And then I think we have to also acknowledge that there are just places that generally go in and out of being trendy. But Portugal has had a phenomenal 10 years with people visiting Lisbon and Porto, and that market's maybe starting to slightly tail off now. Might just be that travelers' tastes are slightly changing, or the crowd moves on. So I don't think we necessarily have to attribute it all to some sort of regulatory or price problem the whole time, but I do think that's worth saying. The other one also is Croatia, is down about 6%. Croatia's been very trendy. Game of Thrones drove that. So we're seeing slightly less visitors to that market in Q1. However, skewed by the fact that the summer hasn't happened yet. So let's see where we are after the summer in some of those destinations. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think a lot of it is people looking for a deal, looking for those kind of off the beaten path destinations. And I also think that younger travelers, as we often comment on the pod, they are more conscious. They don't want to go somewhere where they're not welcome. They are looking for something that's different. And so I think it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense that they're looking for these new areas. I also think it's going to be interesting to see how the regulations continue to develop in these areas. In most of Western Europe, most of the regulations have been reactionary. So, oh no, we've noticed that this is overcrowded, we're going to now start implementing, or we notice that we have an affordable housing crisis, we're going to start making changes. Whereas I think, just as you mentioned earlier, Leo, in Bulgaria and some of these other markets where maybe tourism has been slower to kind of pick up there, and now it is, they've had time to put in the regulations before things got out of hand. And they've also been able to see how they've been done in other areas. And so that means that their regulations oftentimes make a lot more sense. And as we mentioned, they're a lot more positive on the whole for short-term rentals, and a lot more about the bulk of tourism in its totality rather than just sort of demonizing short-term rentals.
Is there anything else on that data you want to go through?
No, I think it's actually a kind of a really nice segue into one of the other articles that I found kind of fun and sort of gives a nod to one we talked about last week, where we talked about an Oasis campground. Why don't you tell us about this one, Leo? What else is the UK coming up with in terms of weird accommodation?
Well, now when I read this one, I laughed a little bit. And again, we try not to do this stuff every single week, but it's quite nice to focus on it because it reminded me, I think, of your Paris experience, Sarah, when you ended up in a cab in a room in the middle of a car park in Paris. So not your classic aspirational Paris holiday. Investigation over what's being coined here in the BBC article a disgraceful Airbnb cabin. The owner of a portable building advertised on Airbnb will be investigated. Okay, so this is very, very interesting. So it was in the car park of a apartment block, and it's been marketed, but it didn't have appropriate permission. Described here as a basic but convenient option to stay in the heart of Hull city centre, Hull, one of our cities in the northeast of England. Again, we might come at this from different angles. Perhaps we will. But I think that, for me, fundamentally, If you've gone onto Google Maps and thought that you're staying in the apartment building, only to find out that you're staying in a porta cabin outside of the apartment building, then we might have a problem. Potentially, you imagine that going up to reception, going, "Hi, I think I'm staying in one of the apartments." They said, "Yeah, let me take you out front to where you are staying." And then obviously there's a serious point here about the lack of planning. If that is the case, obviously we're just reading this article just this weekend, but if there is a lack of planning, then clearly it's a problem. And kudos to Airbnb for taking it down. Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, I want to see the description. I want to see the advert. Because again, I think as with the camping, I mean, first of all, I grew up in the States, so this basically looks like my classroom half the year because all of the schools that I went to were always under construction. Now I pass by when I go home to visit my parents, and they're beautiful. But when I was there, I was in a portable, and they were hot, and they were stinky, and the aircon didn't work, and it was awful. So I was basically in one of those buildings 8 hours a day. Not that bad. I mean, it's better than, I don't know. The article, I did kind of crack up at the article mentioning we have some very nice hotels in the town. Okay, how much are the hotels? Because I think this one was being rented for what, like 55 quid a night or something? Which actually, it basically looks like a place that we stayed a couple of weeks ago when we went camping. And we knew that it was like a bungalow situation. And I think it cost us like 250 euros for 2 nights. So I'd say 55 quid is a bargain. Especially
Sarah's
for really
in, guys. Sarah's in. You absolutely sold it to her.
I'm not even sold. I just think that why is anything illegal as long as it's an honest publication, right? Like if you're absolutely right. If the publication was like, "Oh, you're staying in this nice apartment building," and this is what happened to me in Paris. The photos looked absolutely beautiful. Nobody said it was in a car park, right? If it had said you got to go 2 floors down through a skanky car park, then I would have maybe chose somewhere else. So I think the same with this one. Like, as long as you're honest and the photos are real and they depict reality, like, I don't know. Who's the government to say you can't stay somewhere? But I'm very laissez-faire when it comes to like government hands in people's personal and private property. So
we love you for it, sir. We love you for it. Okay, very, very interesting. Okay, well, look, I think we'll keep seeing these pop up, I'm sure. What I would say is it does our industry massive favors. If we are talking about a situation where there wasn't the proper planning, or you thought you were staying in a flat, not a porta cabin, it does the industry lots of favors when Airbnb is seen to take down these listings, because I think that shows that there is a mechanism for sorting these problems out, but they don't do any favors when it's allowed to exist. So from that point of view, I'm quite strong on this. The other thing to say is I quite like, I don't know, on Instagram, I was looking at people that do tiny houses or trucks that they convert, or freight containers that they convert. And again,
that's a unique listing, Leo.
Yeah,
unique listing. Oh, people love them.
It's cool, but you got to make sure it's selling what it properly is, because I was even thinking this, we call them prefabs, don't we? So you could have fab prefabs. You could have a whole website devoted to prefabs, and I'm sure there'll be enthusiasts that want to stay in them all over the place. But as long as they're honestly referenced on the listing. Okay, Sarah, let's get into the main stuff. We've got an interesting couple of articles. Tell me what are we focusing on first?
Yeah, I think a good lead-in after the growth and all the issues with booking and Airbnb and things like this, and the weird cabin in the park is a really interesting one, which this is an article from FocusWire. I think we often talk about over-tourism on the pod, but not quite so often are we talking about how it can be fixed and what actually local governments can do that isn't just attacking a specific type of lodging for the problem. So this article essentially was going over a couple of ideas on how the tourism industry as a whole can manage attractions to prevent overcrowding. And they had some interesting ideas. A lot of it was around limiting the number of tickets, essentially, that main attractions have. So the Louvre is referenced in the article, for example, as essentially just being uncontrollable with the amount of people that are coming. You can't even walk down the hallways. The workers are saying it's ridiculous. The wait is like 6 hours to see the Mona Lisa, and then you can't even hardly see it, right? So I think in a way it's sort of a victim of its own success. And so one of the things that was talked about here was either having limits for each individual attraction, that are kind of mandated by the government. So the city council would get together with the main attractions and kind of decide, okay, how many people do we actually want? And so far of the people who are coming, what percentage are going to these different attractions? And then there was also an idea thrown around about creating essentially this pass, which does exist in a lot of cities, where you can buy, like a Barcelona travel card or whatever it might be. And that gets you sometimes discounts to different attractions. But I think the idea here was, no, there's these different cards and they include a ticket to all of these main attractions. And either you have one or you don't. The flip side of the debate, which I'm curious to get your opinion on, was exactly what you brought up earlier. If we do this, who is going to prevent people from buying these passes at like a normal price and reselling them on Ticket Swap or something else to the highest bidder? And then are we basically making it impossible for young people to access these attractions? So then, of course, the article kind of backsteps a little bit and says, well, maybe there has to be a percentage of all of these that are reserved for students and people that are unemployed and people that need basically the reduction in the price. So people over the age of 65, people with here it's called like a numerous family in Spain, which is like 3 kids or more. And you get discounts on those sorts of things. So basically cutting out like a section of those tickets for special groups to make sure that it is still somewhat democratic. But I don't know, it opens up a big can of worms because I don't know. I just feel like, especially in Europe, like there's so many people who come from way farther away. I think about me when I plan a trip to Asia or vice versa, somebody from Asia coming to Europe, that trip is planned a year in advance. So of course they've got the tickets. Whereas if you're in Europe, you might plan a trip a month before. You ain't getting no ticket.
It's very tough, isn't it? It's very challenging. Again, it's why we decided to lead on this article. It's an interesting one. Do I think that it works at the moment? No, for anybody. So even if you've bought a ticket, you end up waiting in line for so long. Like the experience is so suboptimal. But again, we're talking about the whole time on this pod and others about how the booking windows are getting shorter. So you're right. Like if people are traveling just 2 hours plane away or 3-hour train away from where they live to going into that town, frustrating if you can't then buy a ticket to an attraction. But it goes back to something I was reading about tourism. You might have read it yourself. It's saying like, tourism's like, a nice bar of chocolate, right? You can have too much of a good thing if you are a town. And obviously if you have museums and attractions, you do want your local school groups and visitors to be able to use them as well. So it needs to be multifaceted. And I think outlawing ticket resellers around cultural attractions is probably a really good idea. I would expect that to be the first way to approach it. You shouldn't really be able to resell a ticket to something which again is technically educational and it belongs to more than just it. Because really, you could say that, like in the case of the Louvre, right? You could say that collection belongs to the French people in many ways, right? And the Mona Lisa belongs to the French people. So, I really don't like the idea that it just becomes a middleman's way of sort of making more cash on top of it if we approach this badly. But clearly with really swelled crowd sizes, you have to do something. So I think one of the things in the article I liked was talking about how you could deseasonalize, so you charge more at peak time versus lower season. That of course would give people on lower incomes or school groups and educational institutions the chance to make these visits during the low season, not the high season. That to me feels like a smarter way of doing it. And then certainly, again, back to that whole mix of like, how do you spread people around your whole country anyway, right? Because clearly, if you're France or Italy in the Colosseum, the last thing you want to do is just get all of your tourists in one city seeing one attraction. You want to try and spread people around. So it goes back to the direct marketing organizations doing a really good job, a thoroughly good job of promoting the different things that you can go and see within a city and within a country that are not just the main attractions. But I do share the frustration. I think that I hate queuing. What do you like? I'm so impatient. I'm just like, forget about it. We went to the Louvre. Got as far as the courtyard, and we went and had a croissant and a coffee, and that was fine for me because I didn't want to queue up.
Yeah, I've never been into the Louvre. I've never gone up to the Eiffel Tower, and I've been to Paris like 7 times. I'm just not interested. Like as soon as I turn up and I see all the crowds, I'm like, I'm just better than that. Yeah, I see it. Nice, sure, whatever. I'm gonna wait in line to see a painting that apparently is this big anyway. And I don't really appreciate art. You'll be shocked to learn. So
I am surprised to hear that. Actually, I'm surprised to hear that.
yeah, I don't get it.
The time will come. The time will come. Who knows?
Yeah, I just don't get. I don't get it. Whereas I have friends who can sit there and they're like, "Oh, just imagine the paint strokes." No.
I also think there's something in the European psyche, right, of visitors, and you'll tell me if this feels true for people from Barcelona. This is true for I think UK people. I'm counting us as being culturally Europe, even though we're not politically Europe. Is that we're always trying to do things that other people haven't done. You're trying to find the road less traveled. I mean, that's slightly different from the mentality potentially in other parts of the world. So like if a Japanese tourist comes to Paris, they want to go and do those main sites. Whereas I think a European, we maybe put more emphasis on culturally on the idea of like, oh, I've found this hidden gem bistro around the corner where we had like a beautiful French dish and wine. And then we went and we wandered and we found a park and we listened to, some jazz. That I don't know. So I also think there's something in that, right? Like, so if you see a queue for the Louvre, you're just going to walk away from it and go, well, we're going to have another authentic experience somewhere else. Is that true of Barcelona, Spain?
I think it really depends. If it's your first time and you've never been to an attraction and it's been your life goal to go to Paris and go to the Eiffel Tower, and I mean, get it, I guess. I'm just not drawn by things or buildings. Like I don't appreciate them. I appreciate food and I appreciate people and culture. And when I travel, that is what I'm after. So like my best moments on a trip have either been something to do with nature. So some kind of beautiful, I don't know, mountain or river or lake or something that I can't get at home. Or, wow, that restaurant in this setting was absolutely beautiful and incredible. And that was the highlight of my trip. It has never been a building or any kind of tourist attraction. But that's, I think, really personal. I know tons of people who absolutely love architecture and appreciate it and go and can stand in front of a beautiful cathedral and be in awe. And I'm like, cool. And then 10 minutes later, like, it's cool and it's impressive. And 10 minutes later, I'm like, go to the bar.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, if I had a euro for every time I'd heard you say that, let's go to the bar. Enough of this. Let's go to the bar.
We've seen it.
Let's make memories. Well, that's what holidays are all about, isn't it? Making memories. All right, we got to do this one. We tried to do it last week, ran out of time. Let's not run out of time again. So this is a really, really interesting trend to talk about. More than the trend, I think, is that I guess like potentially the way travel is going to go. So a focus wire discussion, article summary. We're saying here there was about progressing towards seamless travel with self-sovereignty, self-sovereign identity. So in the article, they discuss how self-sovereign passports or identity is potentially going to be the way that travel is moving, a decentralized environment where the traveler themselves actually manages their data. So they, instead of them having to join Airbnb, for example, and give their ID and give information about themselves, and every time they sign up for something online, they give more information about themselves. The idea that as the traveler, or let's talk about this generally as a consumer, as the consumer, you own your identity, you own your passport, so to speak. We talk about this a lot. Obviously, at Truvi, we're always trying to look to how we can validate who that guest is. So it's something that we talk about the whole time as well. This idea that someone's digital footprint could be well known based on other previous activity they've done. And why should you, as a customer, always have to input your data every single time you enter something new? One might argue. So I think this is really interesting because also there is movements afoot to create digital identity programs at the government level. So it comes up in the UK. We hear it. This gets talked about a lot in the media, the digital identity cards. And I know it's also a feature the European Union is looking to do it as well. And where the European Union goes, often the UK will go because you have joint security agreements when people are traveling over borders and things like that. So if you're going to use that to almost kind of like help keep track of people, you can also use that to gift to that person the incentive, which is, this is great. You just need to put your unique number in here and you are screened and you are through this process. So we wanted to feature this article because I'm kind of firmly in the camp that I think this is the direction of travel. This is the way things are going. But also the other part of it is that alongside that, I think in the AI environment where you've got agentic AI being used to book travel experiences, it's likely that that process needs to be very, very, very seamless, or the traveler look elsewhere. So it's an interesting discussion anyway, but I think it's a discussion that's come of age, because you might be in a world where people go, well, that's fine. I'm your travel agent, your AI travel agent. I know I can pass that information straight through, and you're then able to see what you need to see. Because I read an article that I didn't share with you, actually. I read an article this week about a big house party that had gone on in Manchester, near where I grew up. And it all started from an Instagram booking, right? And we're talking the whole time about how you can take bookings online now, and you can have them go straight through to Instagram, straight through to your direct booking website. But it does raise the question, who's who, and can you trust them? So as a consequence, you need to make sure as a supplier, as a property manager, that you have a way of knowing who that guest is. But the last thing you want to do is cause a break in the booking process that means they go and look elsewhere because you're trying to redirect to do something else. What one might say, also, I can completely understand why a property manager would say, no, you have to go through what I want you to go through because that's what I trust. But I do think it's not too much of a stretch to suggest that that is going to be the direction of travel, and everyone's going to have to follow suit, because if you don't, the booking's just going to go elsewhere. So I think, again, trust is so important in our industry. And why should it be that we have to think about it as just a single point of like, well, they've gone through the loop in my journey, when that information could be collected and held ahead of time? Why is it interesting? Because it means then as a guest, you control which data and who you share your data with. And I think there's logic in that. I could totally see the market going that way. So again, is it? I wouldn't say it's inevitable, but I'm kind of believing that is what guests will aspire to have in their travel booking experience, and therefore the market will have to move in that way. What do you think, my friend?
I don't know, Leo. I have my reservations. I think at a government level, I mean, that already happens. The last couple times I've gone back to the US, it's actually creepy. I stand in front of a machine. It doesn't even ask for my passport. It scans my face and it says, "Welcome home, Fernand Dupree." And you're like, well, that's creepy. And then it asks me to scan my passport just in case. It scans my face. It's really creepy. So I like the technology, I think, is already, from a government perspective, it's already there. They're just trying not to use it because they don't want people to know that they have it and that it's so big brother. China's been doing this for years. And so I think from that level, in terms of like making travel easier, I've always said the same thing. Like, I don't really understand, maybe this is naive, but I don't really understand like the visa thing, or like why I have to register something to come into your country. Like you have my identity, you can scan my face. Like any country that's worth their salt these days that most people are traveling to already has this kind of stuff. So they would have to collaborate with other governments, I guess, to make sure that, like, I don't know, I'm not a mass murderer or something like that. But I would see that as happening when you leave the country as well as when you enter a country, right? So I think from like a safety and travel and making it a lot easier, and like to get through customs, which for me is the worst when you travel properly internationally, that it makes sense for. But that's more facial recognition than like some ID that you hold. I don't know that I would trust an AI booking agent or a computer in general to have all of my data and somehow decide who gets what. And I also don't know that if I was operating a property, for example, like, how do you know which system to use? Unless there is like one clear winner, and there's a specific AI bot, like, are they all going to communicate? So I don't know, but I also don't fully understand the concept, if I'm honest. I was trying to do more research and I still don't understand something about blockchain and all this kind of stuff that I also don't get.
Well, I think that this idea that again, if it is, it could be blockchain, it could be a decentralized thing. But if you assume that it will eventually be done by governments, then at least it will be one recognized ID per person, right? Which could be input into the travel experience by your AI agents. You don't have to jump through any additional hoops. That, I think, makes a lot of sense. And I think that is probably the way we are going to head. Just on your point there around how taking this a step further to the experiential side of things, when you're walking through the airport, when you're walking into your short-term rental, I hope we move to a world which you've just described, where we think about queues and conversations and stamps as a thing of the past. And it is the case that you're able to walk off the plane and you're being tracked. They can see your face. You walk through, and there's plenty of time for them to pull you out if they feel like you're not the person you said you were. But you kind of walk through that experience, basically, both when you go in and when you go out. And then you arrive at your accommodation, your door code is there for you without you having to interact with it, because all of that data was, well, not data was shared, because that's even the point here. We're not sharing data, but that information was, the ID you provided was valid, such that you didn't have to jump through any additional hoops. I think that is a reality. I think that is where we're going to head to, and we will see this kind of like, this additional admin burden as hopefully being a thing of the past. How quickly, though? Again, it's very easy to make a statement like that when you're not going to quantify it with how long it might take for us to get there. And that I've just got absolutely no idea. This AI stuff's moving really quickly, but when you throw it into the mix, I think the only way to get this done from a booking perspective would be to have the government ID being the standard. Governments do not move quickly, even if AI moves quickly. So that slows it down a little bit. We're well over time, but we had to do it. Sarah, so nice to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too, buddy.
What's on the agenda? Have you got holiday? It must be holiday time, surely, right?
No, not yet. Not until the end of July. End of July, we got Tomorrowland, the music festival.
Oh, yeah, of course.
So
nice.
I'm holding out for that.
We're just about to book Belgium. So not your classic Mediterranean destination. No, we're going to do a short-term rental or a lodge in the forest type holiday just outside Bruges. And we're going to go in the car. Nice. And get on the car. There's a car train. There's a train for cars that takes you under the sea. How awesome is that?
Of course, you're getting on a train on your car.
I'm going to live stream. I'm going to live stream you the whole way just to show you how cool it is. This dashboard cam, just so you can accept that it's a great way to travel. Okay, so look forward to that.
I can't wait to hear about it, buddy.
She's going to glaze over. It's like when someone shows you the holiday pictures and you're like, I don't care. He's passionate about it, but I don't care. Right, gang. So nice to see you all you guys at home. Hope everyone's well. We're into the summer madness now, aren't we? So I hope that's going well. If you've enjoyed the show, please hit like, share, subscribe, and all the usual social places. Until we see you again next week, have a great week. Many thanks. Bye.